A big warm welcome to Dr. Georgia Carson from the Malaghan Institute. It's fantastic to have you here today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Georgia received her PhD from Te Herenga Waka, Victoria University of Wellington, working under the supervision of Associate Professor Melanie McConnell and Professor Mike Berridge. The main aim of her PhD was developing and validating molecular methods to identify mitochondrial transfer amongst leukemic and non-leukemic cells in a murine bone marrow model. Apologies for the pronunciation. Georgia's going to help us with some of this tech stuff today, hopefully. He assembled a technique that would detect this transfer at a rare level and identified cases of mitochondria moving between cells of the bone marrow in vivo. Dr. Carson is a postdoctoral research fellow at Berridge Lab and is the Malaghan Institute's Māori Engagement Advisor. So warm welcome again, Georgia. Great to have you, and we really look forward to hearing what you have to say this afternoon. And the virtual floor is all yours.
Thank you. I will share my. Can I share my screen?
I'll just give you. I think I'll give you permission here. Try that now.
So can everyone see that all right? It should be a picture of some scientists, lovely smiling faces.
We can see that. That's great.
Fantastic. Okay, so yes, as Stephen said, my name is Georgia Carson and I work at the Malaghan Institute of Medical Research. You may have heard of us, possibly more so recently with COVID. But yeah, so this photo is a little bit old. What does that mean? We focus on discoveries around immunology, things to do with the immune system. If you know anything about, say, COVID vaccines, or when you get an infection, immunology is related to studying that. So what happens in the body and how we might be able to develop therapies to treat it. We're a registered charity, so we're not owned by the government. We're not a Crown Research Institute. We're for Aotearoa by Aotearoa, for the benefit of everyone in the country. And although we're based in Wellington, Te Whanganui Aotearoa, we have national collaborations and research that goes all throughout New Zealand through our collaborators, and internationally as well. I keep on having to update this, but we're about 140 people now, and most of us are scientists, but we also have people that assist us with fundraising and IT and things like that, but we're mostly scientists. We rely a lot for our function, on trusts, on community grants. We have some money that comes from the government, but like I said, we're independent, and so a lot of our research relies on philanthropy, which is great because people feel like they're connected to our research. And why do we exist? Well, for any biomedical research institute and working there, you think about, why do you come into work every day? And it's essentially this. I like the slide because it pairs it right down to what's important, right? Too many of our loved ones are dying and suffering from diseases we don't know enough about. Lots of therapies have been developed over the years, chemotherapies for cancer, but what's the next stage? We still have people dying of cancer. I have cancer in my whānau. My auntie died, my nan died this year. People are still dying of these diseases. So how can we take the next step and treat the people that might not respond to traditional therapies? So the main focus of the whole institute actually is immunology. So all of the diseases that you can have in your body will interact with the immune system in some way. The immune system does hold the key to fixing diseases, right? Whether that be cancer or that be an infectious disease like COVID, getting a viral infection, things like that. We can use the immune system to then treat diseases, as opposed to maybe chemotherapy, like I mentioned before, which is quite a blunt treatment. So that's the main umbrella of everything that we work on at the Malaghan Institute. And we sort of have these three different streams, right? So lots of places might just focus on developing therapies, but we also try and get the more fundamental stuff as well. So my PhD was in quite basic research. I was looking at cells and mitochondria, and in a cancer model, I was looking at the different parts of the cells swapping from one cell to another. And people would always ask me, what's the point of that? And I say, okay, it's not like I've finished my PhD, now I've cured cancer. Unfortunately, for a lot of biomedical research, you need to lay the foundations, right? We're researching how to understand the immune system, because that is the only way that we can then move on to these treatments to fight diseases. So we have a lot of our groups that focus on this quite fundamental research, like understanding the cells of the immune system. How do they actually work in a normal situation? How do they work when you've got an infection? And then, okay, now we know that, how can we develop some therapies that are going to treat it? And this third panel is about the fair access, and it's something that I'm really passionate about as well. So it's all very well making a fancy new therapeutic, but what happens if people can't access it? What happens if people are disabled and can't get to the doctors, or they've got some other reason that they live rurally maybe, and they can never access it? It's great having money developing treatments, but how do we make sure and do everything in our power to make sure that the fruits of our research are made available to people in the community? So those are the three sort of pillars. You might be wondering why we called the Malaghan Institute, and some people say Malaghan, but it's a silent G, so Malaghan Institute, and this is because of Len Malaghan. So I didn't know him, he died a very long time ago, but it was his legacy, really. He wanted to set up an independent medical research institute, and he actually, the reason that he had the money to do this was because he founded Tip Top. So next time you're enjoying an ice cream, maybe in the summer, not now, but you can thank Len Malaghan for that. So him and his wife, they became philanthropists, and they thought, okay, right, well, what can we do with this money that we've produced, And so in the 80s, we were founded in the 60s, and in the 80s, we changed our name to the Malaghan Institute because of his support. And their son is still the chairperson of our board, so he comes in quite often. And yeah, that's great to have that sort of family connection there. Our probably four main, I'd say, things that we put on the CV of the Malaghan Institute, things that we're sort of famous and known for. I would say the cancer immunotherapy, the first one, so using the immune system to fight cancer. The hygiene hypothesis, so that's about, washing your hands and, what the word hygiene is, good hygiene, and what is the effect on the immune system. Vaccine technology, that's been especially relevant recently, and then gene transfer discovery. So that was what my PhD was on, looking at mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of the cell. They're like the batteries that exist in cells, and looking at them popping over from one cell to another, which was a very important piece of research for thinking about the implications of both cancer and then also neurodegeneration, things like Alzheimer's. You might be wondering, I suppose I haven't really fully explained it yet, but the immune system. I've talked a bit about the immune system. Maybe you're aware of the immune system, especially since COVID, maybe not, that's fine, but the immune system is vitally important to everybody living. If you did not have an immune system, you'd be dead, essentially. And it's essentially your body's way of protecting you, right? The traditional thing is sort of bacteria and viruses, but anything that might harm your body, your immune system is designed to protect you against. And I've got this cool video. I hope you can see it, but these are videos of actual immune cells. These type of immune cells are called T cells, and you can probably see that they're hunting. Their job is to exclusively move around the body and find an invader that they're designed to kill. So they're amazing. You don't need to do anything for this to occur in your body. It happens by itself. I thought I would show you, this one is pretty great. We've got a video recently that we've produced that gives you the overview of the immune system. And I thought that I would show that with you. Let me know if you can't hear it. The audio should come through.
The human immune system is a complex network of cells, tissues, and organs spread throughout your body. These communicate, coordinate, and collaborate, providing natural defenses that keep you healthy and safe.
It's just a few
We are
months.
all born with innate immunity that acts fast to stop the spread of organisms that may cause harm, like viruses, bacteria, or parasites. Your skin is a organisms from entering your body, while mucous membranes, stomach acid, saliva, and tears contain substances to kill or prevent their growth. If a harmful organism or pathogen enters your body, immune cells detect the invader and trigger an alarm. Many of these cells are non-specific, so they can recognize and attack a wide variety of pathogens. Chemical signals produced by innate immune cells attract other immune cells to fight the infection and repair any damage. You may feel a response such as inflammation at the site of the infection and a mild fever. This shows that your immune system is hard at work fighting the invader. If a pathogen can't be stopped by your innate immune system, then your adaptive immune system kicks into gear. Adaptive immune cells, including T cells and
That was
B
the video
cells,
from before, the
are
T
trained to
cells.
recognize and attack specific invaders.
They're my favorites.
T cells can directly attack infected cells, while B cells produce antibodies that help to identify and neutralize specific pathogens. These cells take time to develop a tailored response, but can remember and respond more quickly if the invader returns. We can also use vaccines to train the adaptive immune system to protect against a specific pathogen without risking exposure to the disease.
So COVID is an example of
The
that.
immune system is your own personal natural defense mechanism made up of physical and chemical barriers, immune cells, and immune responses working together to protect your body from foreign invaders. It develops throughout your life to repair and heal your body when it is injured or damaged, with a memory to provide immunity acquired from previous infections.
Cool. So that video is on our website and on our YouTube if you want to watch it again. But yeah, I thought it was pretty cool when our comms team put that out. I was like, yeah, no, that gets down to what it's about. You know, this amazing system that you cannot live without, and that we researched to try and improve therapies. Oh no, don't play it again. So yeah, the main strands of our research right now are cancer. So that's the team that I work in. And then we have a couple of different projects within the cancer, infectious disease. So COVID is a big part of that, but also using what we've learned about infectious disease during COVID and a lot of the resources that's been put into that, and then applying that to other diseases. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Allergic and inflammatory disease, which is also really interesting because if you've ever read about Allergy, you know that your immune system is most of the time it's awesome, but it can get a little bit too much. And sometimes when you have an overactive immune system, you can have these your immune system gets a little bit out of whack, and that's what allergy is essentially. Your immune system, your body responding to things that it shouldn't really. So we also researched that to say, okay, how do we tune it down a little bit when we want to? And then general immune health, how your immune system interacts with things like, say, food, to give you an optimal immune system for future infectious disease and things like that. So cancer, that's probably the one I know the most about. So if you ask me questions that are not about cancer, I'll do my best. But so our cancer projects are a really key part of it. And you might think, oh, I don't know if the immune system has much to do with cancer. But if you think about it, your immune system, yes, it does attack bacteria and viruses and things like this. But your immune system can also fight against cancer. It's a little bit different because cancer is yourself. It is in you. It's not coming in from the environment, even though it can be caused by things in the environment. But if your immune system is working optimally, it can also fight against cancer. And so we've got fundamental cancer cell biology, which is what I work in, and then also cancer immunotherapy. And I'll talk a little bit about that. That's kind of the more cool, exciting new stuff. So cancer cell biology, this is a photo that I did not take this photo, but there's a guy I did my PhD with, Remy, who took this amazing photo. And I don't know if anyone knows about mitochondria. It might be something that you remember from high school. That mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell is sometimes a phrase that people say, but it's true. So mitochondria, you'll often see them drawn as kind of like cute little beans in a cell. You've got a cell that your body's made up of, and the nucleus with the DNA inside, and then mitochondria, the sort of little batteries. They do function as batteries. They give the cell the energy to function. And so what I was looking at is these mitochondria, which actually in the red here are the mitochondria. They actually make these really cool networks. They look a lot more awesome in real life than they do in the textbook, I'll tell you that. But looking at the mitochondria of cancers and saying, right, okay, how do these mitochondria function to enable cancer cells to avoid death by treatment? If you set a radiation to a particular area, you'll always get some cancer cells that escape. And how do they do that? And how do the mitochondria help them to do that? How do they survive? So I was looking at intracellular transfer of mitochondria. That's when the cancer cells were pretty much co-opting mitochondria from the healthy cells around them, saying, hey, I'm not going to let this radiation beat me. I'm going to get mitochondria from somewhere else. So it had very poor treatment resistance in cancer. And there are also things like neurodegenerative diseases and aging. How could we maybe encourage it in say neurons that don't survive very well when you've got a neurodegenerative disease? How can we make sure that your brain stays tip-top? But that was quite basic research, the sort of fundamental stuff that we need to build on for treatments and things like that. This is a picture of my lab group. You can tell I'm not photogenic at all. The other ones are a lot better. This was our silly one. But my postdoc research currently is sort of continuation of my investigating how when you've got metastases, which unfortunately is what usually kills people when you've got cancer, oftentimes you can do a treatment on the primary, what we call the primary tumor, where it starts. But then if you miss a metastatic event, if it metastasizes, then that will probably be what kills someone. So I'm looking at how changes in gene expression allow the cancer cells to do that. Because if I can say, oh, they're changing these particular characteristics, they're changing this gene or that gene, then that is a particular way that we could then tweak our therapies to make sure that those things don't happen. So yeah, the fundamental research on metastases is also really important. And talking about cancer immunotherapy, this is a science, the cover of the Science journal from 2013, I think. So 10 years ago now, they said cancer immunotherapy, this is, important stuff. And so Ian Hermans, who's at the Malaghan Institute, this is his project. And it's essentially saying, hey, we know that things like chemotherapy and radiation, they work some of the time and they've saved a heck of a lot of lives, but they don't always work for everyone. They don't always kill all of the cancer. How can we use the immune system to really properly cure people, long term? How do we train our immune system? We know our immune system can find cancer and kill it. Sometimes it doesn't. So trying to initiate the immune system's anti-tumor capacity, which already exists, but just increase it. And this is done through vaccine technologies. So I wanted to drill in a little bit to something that you may have heard about. It has been on the news, but if you search CAR T-cell, it's a fantastic, amazing technique. And also there's a movie which follows some people that through CAR T-cell cancer therapy. So I can send you links to these things that Stephen can send out to everyone. But it's a pretty amazing technology. So CAR essentially means chimeric antigen receptor T-cells. So the video I showed you before was T-cells, and they are naturally very good at finding infection, finding cancer, fighting cancer. But how can we make it even better? So the process is essentially, if you've ever given blood or given serum or plasma, then you would have seen this happen probably, but the blood is taken out from the patient that has cancer. And then what we do is we just get the T cells. So most of the blood is not T cells, it's mostly red blood cells. We just focus on the T cells. And then they're reprogrammed in a really awesome way. We use a genetic sequence that is particular to their type of cancer. And then we introduce it through what's called a lentiviral vector, which is, it's essentially a virus. So we use the scaffolding of a virus and make sure it's not. Biomedical research is amazing for co-opting things that nature already has and making them work for us. So we can use like just the outside of a virus to introduce things into cells. And so we say to the T cells, hey, you're doing an okay job, but what we need you to do is to find this particular cancer. And so we're going to give you a gene for the cancer so you can find it. And essentially the T cells say, okay, and they accept this transduced gene, and then they produce these receptors, which are the little pokey bits on the T cell, and they become CARs. They're chimeric now because they've been changed a little bit. And now that importantly, they can recognize and attach to the cancer cells and they can kill it. So we grow these T cells up. We've got a little cocoon downstairs in the lab that is designed specifically for these T cells. And then the patient goes through some conditioning chemotherapy just to make space. And then you put the T cells back in, and it is amazing. You know, we've had people that just totally cured. So it's one of those fantastic technologies that I encourage you to look up and find out more about, because it's pretty amazing. and you know, people can live a lot longer than they might have otherwise. Yeah, and infectious diseases, that's sort of another big part of our focus here at the Malaghan. Infectious diseases, COVID is the classic one. How does that interact with our immune system? You might have noticed that maybe you felt a little bit different than your friend did after getting the COVID vaccine, or you felt okay with the first dose, but the booster really, you know, and those things will be quite personal, you know, and how do we, lots of those things we don't know yet, but the more we learn, the more we can make treatments more effective. And then the knowledge that we get from that is also good for things like autoimmune diseases, what I talked about before, when you have a bit of an overactive immune system where it needs to dial it down a little bit. So this is a really cool picture that I love of my colleague Teresa, and we've had a lot of government interest, as you can imagine, for our vaccine program. So COVID has been sort of a blessing and a curse. I mean, it was hugely, but then also the resources that have gone into vaccine development, and actually people saying, oh, hey, this is actually a pretty important thing to research. That's been sort of good for us in that respect. It's kind of a silver lining, even though it's, you know, it's been a horrible time. But yeah, the flip side is people recognizing that it's really important. So a big part of that is our new vaccine alliance, Aotearoa New Zealand, VANZ. And it's a national thing. It's not just us, it's the University of Otago, it's ESR, and it's saying, okay, this is pretty important that we are prepared for when the next pandemic comes, which might be some other sort of virus. How can we be prepared? And so a big part of this is a homegrown booster. And I put this in because I thought this was pretty awesome. And again, if you go on our website, we've got newsletters. So this is a story from the most recent Scope newsletter that we have about our KiwiVax COVID booster. And this is actually using the older style of vaccines. So if you've heard anything about the Pfizer one, it's an mRNA technology, which is great, but we can also do other sorts of vaccines. This one is with the protein of the spike protein from the virus. And so it works in a traditional way, in a way similar to the traditional vaccines. So if you've ever heard anyone that says, oh, I don't want to get vaccinated because of that mRNA technology, well, you can say, hey, you know, when KiwiVax comes out, that might be an option for you. But what's really awesome about it is it's homegrown. You know, it's developed in New Zealand, and we don't have to rely on overseas countries and you know, organizing contracts and shipping and stuff. And this one is also stable at room temperature. So, you know, although the mRNA vaccines, you might have heard, oh no, we can't leave them out of the freezer for too long and they have to be very cold. These ones don't have to. So it's just making sure that people have options, right? You know, whatever they want to get. And yeah, this is pretty exciting for us because it's we're just doing preclinical work at the moment before it goes into people, but it's been very, very effective. It's safe, you know, in terms of the effects. Some people get side effects from vaccines, but this one is looking like it's very safe. You know, it's stable, and and most importantly, it works against new variants, so things like Omicron and things like that. So keep your ears open for KiwiVax. I think I didn't have a huge amount more, but yeah, the mRNA technology that I mentioned before about Pfizer, a really great thing about it is that the mRNA technology, it doesn't have to be just applied to COVID. If you know what gene your infectious agent is, or your parasite even, you can design it. So it's kind of plug and play in a way. So we do have projects going on, especially collaborations with the Malaghan Institute about hepatitis B, malaria, things like influenza. You can't forget about influenza because, you know, people die from influenza as well. So how do we use the technology that has been developed, I mean, for decades and decades, but more attention has been paid to it recently? And how do we apply that to train our body's immune system to look for these other things that are generally quite hard to treat, as well as cancer as well. And then a little bit about allergy and inflammatory disease. This is the thing, I don't know, I don't really like this picture very much, but you know that especially for children, you know, allergy and inflammatory disease, it can be a huge burden on your quality of life, right? If you have allergy, if you've got hay fever, if you've got, you know, psoriasis or something like that, anything that comes from your immune system, these are all your immune systems not quite being dialed right. So what we do with our research in that respect is looking at what are the genetic triggers and what are the environmental things, because oftentimes someone will be predisposed to allergy or an inflammatory disease, and then something in the environment happens, and then boom, you know, it's full blown. So studying that is a way to develop effective treatments for those sort of things, because you'll notice that I mean, and this is only just going up, that allergic diseases affect a lot of people. I mean, so you've got things that I studied like cancer, where it's not as many people, and you know, the death rates are very high, but then you'll also have things like allergy, which may be less likely to kill you, but also they're, like I said, it's quality of life thing. You know, it's really difficult to go around, especially if you've got some quite serious allergies. So yeah, that's a big area of what we research. 1 in 5 New Zealanders, so quite a lot, mostly children as well. So one of our big sort of famous claims to fame, I suppose, is that our director Graham Legros was involved in research, and this is back in the 90s, about the hygiene hypothesis. So I talked about it before about, hygiene, keeping clean and things like this. But you've probably heard, especially more recently, that it's not always the best idea to be clean all of the time. Kids should probably go out into the environment and play, because that is the training ground for their immune system. And that's hypothesized to be a reason why, in the modern era, more and more children are developing allergies and things like that. So we've got some research that says, yes, it's depending on the infection, but in general, children should be to various things like dirt. You might have noticed this maybe in some of your grandchildren or children, but if a child develops one allergy, they will often develop further allergies, and it's quite predictable to start off with some eczema, and the next thing you know, they're allergic to peanuts, and it all comes from the same dynamic in their immune system. It's overreactive, and then it goes on and on. So how do we stop this? How do we the more we research, the more we know how to look at those immune cells and say, right, no, what should we do to make sure that this allergic development doesn't keep marching and help people's quality of life? Parasitic worms, these are pretty awesome. I think you might be looking at a worm and thinking, oh. And so some of our research is looking at the actual positive impacts of parasitic worms. Because if you think about the fact that we've co-evolved with worms, with infectious things like parasites and like worms, they can actually have positive impacts, but it all kind of depends on the context. So some of our research is in ways to prevent chronic and harmful worm infections, but then some of our research is about how worms can successfully tune down the immune system. So that relates back to what I said before about how if you've got an overactive immune system, maybe parasitic worms are part of the solution. It's not for everyone, I know, but worms are very effective at dampening down sort of an overactive immune system. So maybe the next step is to say, okay, what is it about these worms? Because if they're just secreting something, maybe we don't need to use the whole worm. But that's some of our research that's in a fairly early stage right now. But, we're doing trials for things like irritable colitis and things like that in it. So that's something else. And then, finally, the gut, about optimal health. And we've got some projects at the Malaghan Institute that are investigating the interaction between, say, your diet and your immune system, because essentially the immune system needs to be trained up right from when you're a baby and you come out of the womb. You're exposed to all of these things, and your immune system uses that to train itself up. And so what is the effect of, say, things like having additional fiber, or having an infection earlier on in life? Your microbiome, you might have heard about that, the gut biota that naturally occur in your body. And what is the sort of, it'll probably depend on what food you're eating, whether you were breastfed or not, things that you got from your mother. But we know some things about, okay, what is a good mixture of gut biota that then lead you to have a strong and healthy rest of your life, and it's never too late, to start eating well and affecting the rest of your life. But we know that diet is very important. So a lot of our research is looking at at the effect of that, and how does the gut and the food and the immune system all interact to give you a healthful life. So yeah, in summary, you know, it's all related to the immune system. Even diseases that you don't think of as necessarily being related to the immune system, it's all interrelated. And how do we do that in a more kind of natural way to switch the system off and on naturally? Then we can really make great progress in treating diseases, especially those that we don't yet know how to treat very well. So I don't know if I have time. I might just end it there. I did have a video, but it's on our website as well, and you can look at it when you wish. I will send a link. I had questions, I think. Yes.
That was fantastic.
Yes, okay.
Would you?
I'll stop the share as well.
It would just add myself as a spotlight. There we go. That was fantastic. Yeah, really fascinating. I was just,
Thank you.
as you were talking, I was just thinking about, you know, when I go get my flu vax or, you know, my COVID vax, I don't think about the thousands, hundreds of thousands of hours that have gone into making that or preparing that or studying that.
It's a lot. It's a lot. I work in the office with the people that are in the VANS project, and my goodness, the spreadsheets you would not believe.
I mean, it's just so much work has gone into a lot of the things that that we just take for granted, I guess. You know, just go get my vax or the COVID booster or whatever it is. It's so that was absolutely fantastic. We've got some questions. I've written down a whole bunch of questions, but I failed school biology, so my questions are going to be really basic. But,
that's all right. Basic is good. Basic is good. If you have that question, somebody else will have that question.
Yes, yeah, probably. And if you remember, if you want to ask a question, chuck it in the chat down the bottom. Anne has asked, your passion for your work is obvious. What excited you in your teens to pursue the sciences? That's a good question.
Oh, in my teens, yeah. So I did biology all the way. I went to school in Lower Hutt, and I had a really great high school biology teacher who prompted me to do biotechnology. So my major in undergrad was biotechnology. And I remember him talking about how in the past, diabetics used to just die. And that was horrific because I knew diabetics, they're diabetics in my family. And before, you know, like the 20th century, people would just die. And then they discovered that the insulin that regulates your blood sugar from the pancreas of pigs was similar enough to humans that it could sort of work. And so people were harvesting from these pig pancreases, the insulin, and that sort of worked for a while. Like it was.
I think we've just lost Georgia for a moment. Hopefully she'll come back. Just obviously having some internet issues. Yeah. Let me just
can keep people alive. Oh, it's,
sorry, Georgia, we just
no, that's all right.
We lost it for about a minute there. Do you want to just turn your video back on?
Oh, sorry. I hope that was the first time. Sometimes the internet
at the very beginning, but that was fine. You came back on. But sorry, we lost you when
was I talking about pig insulin?
Pig insulin,
Yeah. So we worked out how to synthesize it, and now that's what keeps diabetics alive. And I remember him, this high school biology teacher, telling me about it. And I was like, I want to do something like that.
Yeah. Like I say, I don't think about that stuff, but my daughter is insulin dependent diabetic, and last night we changed her site for her insulin pump, and I just don't think think about where it all came from, and somebody
we're so lucky
has gone into that
progress,
which is phenomenal.
But there's further steps that we can do, where there are some diseases that we're in the diabetics are just going to die stage, so there's always progress to be made.
One of my questions kind of relates to that, and that's I don't know what my question exactly is, but you're working on some massive projects. Cancer is a ginormous project that could go on for decades and decades and decades. You're focused on one part of that, I guess. How do you keep your eye on the big picture? How do you keep your eye on the big picture and what you're doing as part of a big complex web of scientists and researchers all over the world?
That's probably one of the biggest challenges as a scientist, to be really in the minutiae day to day, and then also trying to keep perspective. I think for me, what I do to keep that perspective is, number one, I talk to people that aren't scientists, because it's no use working on something that's not actually, people don't care about. If you're saying, oh, I'm going to work on this thing, and it's like, okay, cool, but this is what we need right now. So talking to people that don't know anything about the science and getting them to keep on asking you, why does that matter? Also going to conferences and things like that really helps, because you'll come across people that are working on things that are in the same disease, but slightly different or completely different. There are still people that work on improving chemotherapies and radiation and things like that. And even though that's not what I do at all, it all influences each other, right? Because a patient is a whole person, and they're probably going to get through multiple treatment options. So keeping that in mind is really important. So you're just talking to people outside of your own zone. And even, within the Malaghan internally, we have weekly seminars where, the cancer people will present to everyone, and the allergy people will present to everyone. And it's good to kind of keep you outside your own tiny little sphere. But yeah, you're right, it's a challenge.
Yeah. And I guess related to that is, I was going to ask you, how there must be other people around the world doing similar research to what you're doing.
Yeah.
How do you, you talked about conferences and stuff, on obviously reading journals and things. How do you stay connected, and how do you know that someone hasn't sort of discovered something that you're working on, or discovered something that affects your work, to change direction? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, again, that's always a I mean, I don't want to say it's a fear, but sometimes you will hear stories about people that's like, oh no, I got like pipped at the post on a particular project. Like somebody might be doing their PhD, and then all of a sudden they see a paper that comes out from someone across the other side of the world that did their project, and then they just published it. And sometimes that does happen, but again, you've kind of got to keep the perspective as like, this is helping people, right? If this gets us closer to curing a particular disease, then it's all for, the greater good, right? But yeah, you do just have to keep your ear to the ground a little bit. And I rely on, my PhD supervisor, who I still catch up with on occasion, and she's really good at, keeping your ear to the ground about what papers are coming out. You subscribe to a lot of newsletters. You have journal club with other people. You say, oh, what's come out in this area? And, you all share papers and things like that. So, it's a never ending thing. I've got so many newsletter emails that I should probably go through at some point, but after this.
I think we all do that, but yeah, that's really, it's really fascinating. You're kind of part of a global body of people.
Yeah. I mean, scientists have to work together, right? Because there are some things like, if your institute has a particular piece of technology that someone else doesn't, or like we have collaborators mostly for our group in Prague in the Czech Republic, and they have particular expertise that I do not, and vice versa. There are things that we can do that they can't. So, that's the essence of collaboration, and together we publish papers and write up things like that. So
yeah. Again, if you have a question, just throw it in the chat and we can read it out to Georgia. I think with COVID, there seemed to be a really intense scrutiny on medical researchers and scientists for a period of time. Everybody crossing their fingers saying, come on, come up with a vaccine. And it seemed to happen so quickly. And I know that was that new technology that you talked about, mRNA or mRNA.
mRNA, yeah. I mean, it was the new part was applying it to the pandemic. The mRNA, so, I mean, quick primer, I didn't go into it a lot because it takes a little while to explain, but mRNA is a natural part of a cell process. You might have heard of DNA. DNA turns into mRNA, which turns into protein, the building blocks of cells. This is sort of a basic primer on cell biology. If you know what the mRNA is for a particular virus, that is a great advantage. We knew that the spike protein for COVID, and it changed a little bit with the different variants, but what we can do is we can, isolate it from people's noses and sequence it and say, right, this is the COVID, this is the spike protein, the little bit that sticks out of it, and this is the kind of the signature for COVID. This is its unique characteristic. And if it changes, we'll sequence you again and we'll find the new spike protein. What you can do when you know what that protein is you can make a code for the spike protein. So that's what the KiwiVax takes advantage of, knowing what the spike protein is. And then you can put it into, so what the Pfizer vaccine did is they put in code for the spike protein as part of the vaccine. And that's essentially teaching your body, hey, T cells, if you get COVID, this is what it is. This is what it looks like. Now you know how to recognize it and kill it. So the mRNA, people have been studying mRNA for as long as we've known about it, which is most of the 20th century. The new part was the technology to say, okay, what is the code for the spike protein? How do we apply that to a vaccine? So from the outside, it does look like it went very fast. And you're right, it did go very fast because of the importance of it. A lot of the studies, usually what happens is you'll have research and then you'll have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and each is with slightly more people. Biomedicine is very careful. I mean, you're giving treatments to people. You want to be sure. What happened with the COVID vaccine is those phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials happened in parallel rather than one after the other. So we kind of, I wouldn't say it was cutting corners, but we did find ways to make it go faster because, people were dying so quickly. And, a lot of money went into it. So there were ways to make it roll out into the community faster. I think we just need to keep in mind that coming together that we did for that vaccine and apply it to other things because people are still dying, if not from COVID, from other things. But I think that should be a good test case for these really important things that we need to grapple with, and there's probably going to be another pandemic at some point. So something to bear in mind. Sorry, that wasn't very cheery.
No. I think everybody understands it. It certainly could happen quite easily again at any time.
Yeah, so that's what the VANS program is about. Is saying, okay, now we know about this technology. What are the processes that we can put in place for the next time to make it even faster and while keeping people safe.
Yeah. Just picking up on a comment you had of that diagram, the immunotherapy diagram where you had the T cells and
the CAR T therapy.
You said you have had people totally cured.
Yeah. So again, I'll send a link to you for to share it around. But a couple of years ago, we had a film called, I didn't make the film, but A Mild Touch of Cancer. And that followed David Downs, who's sort of like our spokesperson. He was in business and he's a bit of a comedian actually, but he's a great character. And he went to the US and it was one of the first CAR T therapies. It started in the US. We've got our own one. But he went to the US and he was at the point where, this many weeks to live kind of stage. So what usually happens is depending on your cancer, you'll try chemotherapy, you'll try radiation. Oftentimes it might work, maybe for a little bit of time. It does often come back, and it's really hard to deal with recurrent cancer. And he went to the US and they infused his own T cells that were made into CAR T cells. They had the chimeric and
Lost Georgia again. Just see if I can get her back.
T cells outside your, oh,
There we go. We just lost you again.
sorry, did you lose me again?
Carry on. Yeah.
Yes, but so David has been free of cancer for years and years now, and the same with a lot of other people, you know. So it's just the barrier to entry now is just cost, really, because it's personalized medicine. It's still very expensive, and so how do we sort of upgrade it to say, okay, you can get CAR T cell therapy without having to, you know, remortgage your house, because that's what some people have had to do. So, but yeah, it's an amazing technology.
Well, that's unbelievable, really. I mean, again, costs. We hear about costs of medicines all the time.
Yeah.
As I say, I've got diabetic family members, and I see the cost quite phenomenal. But the technology is there for her to live a normal life. It often does come down to cost. So anyway, that's been incredibly insightful. I'm going to we're just going to finish there. I'm going to hand over to Kirsten, who is going to just say thanks and wrap everything up. Hang on a second. I'm going to.
Thanks, everyone.
Here we go. Removal. Sorry, hang on. Just going to put her on the ad spotlight. There we go.
Oh, well, thanks so much, Georgia. That was really fascinating, and I could listen for another hour. So yeah, thanks for taking the time to put that PowerPoint together and talk to us for nearly an hour. You're a great representative of Wellington. Well done.
Thank you.
You don't need to go all around the world. You can just stay right where you are, please, and keep working on stuff for us. Yeah, one of the points you made right at the beginning was that the Malaghan Institute is trying to make access fairer for all, and I think we were just kind of talking about that really at the end there around the cost of some of these treatments. So let's hope, you know, we can find some solutions to that. I've just been part of a Give a Little page for a guy that's doing the CAR T cells, and it's costing him $100,000 to get that treatment. So yeah, it's pretty awesome, pretty awful that people have to, like, say, pay that amount of money. But it was kind of cool to hear that the founder or the first philanthropist for the Malaghan Institute was the founder of Tip Top. Yeah, our most favourite you know, New Zealand brand, Tip Top. He made so much money he was able to help us in other ways. That was pretty cool. I wasn't that keen to hear about the parasitic worms. And you used the word awesome when you talked about the parasitic worms.
Well, they're a bit icky, but yeah, they are awesome.
No, thank you. Yeah, but you know, I guess we might as well utilize these horrible little things to do good for us, eh? And the other thing that I thought was funny was the hygiene hypothesis around, you know, dirt is good, and the kids, you know, going out and playing in the dirt is not a bad thing. It's how my brother and I grew up, and I guess we've protected our kids a bit from that, but it's not too, you know, it's not a bad thing. So that's good. So yeah, thank you so much for your time, and thank you to the Malaghan Institute for giving us to you for an hour or so. All the best.
You're welcome. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for having me.
Thank you, Georgia. Thanks, Kirsten, for that. That was fantastic, Georgia. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us today, and we'll see you next month.